November 18th meeting of our Essa Steering Committee. It's good to see everyone, even if it is by Zoom. Hope you're having a good day and things are going smoothly for you. The first thing on our agenda is to approve our minutes from the April 1st meeting. Does anyone have a comment or a question about the minutes? Okay, if not, I need a motion for approval.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the minutes as written.
Okay.
I second.
Okay, I think that was making sure Ms. Flowers made the motion and Ms. Sanders seconded. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion passes. All right. Our first thing on our agenda for discussion is the Perkins 5 updates. And is that Ms. Boyette? Are you going to take that?
Hi, this is Dr. Lydia McDonald. I'm the program coordinator for Perkins 5, and Jennifer Boyette is also with us.
Okay.
She's our program advisor. Do I need to share my screen for the slides? Sorry. All right, I'm having difficulties. I apologize.
There, we got it.
All right, and I'm sorry I can't get the slideshow up, but we will go from here. As I said, I'm Dr. Lydia McDonald. I'm the new program advisor for Perkins 5 Accountability and Funding. I've been here just over a month and learning a great deal about CTE and Perkins and all the wonderful things that are going on around the state to help our students really get some
Ms.
good
McDonald, can you get just a little bit closer to your microphone, please? I think we're having a little trouble understanding you.
I am sorry. Can you hear me better now? Hello?
No, just a little bit closer maybe, and then we'll listen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have not had difficulties before. So let's talk a little bit about what we've got going on here. So since the last update, as I said, we've had some staff changes here. I am the program coordinator. Jennifer, are you on for people to get to see your face and know who you are? Jennifer? Okay. So the Perkins 5 plan, as you know, was approved at the end of June of 2020, and it was implemented on July 1st of this year. And I do have a link to that state plan if you're interested in seeing more details of all the requirements that we have. Sarah Schamberger did a lot of the work to create the state plan and to ensure that we are in line with the federal guidelines and have performance indicators that really speak to our state. When funds were allocated, we did receive as a state $13,246,104. 85% of those dollars are awarded for local funds for those programs to be established and created for the students. 10% of that award goes for state leadership and 5% is for state administration. So Perkins it's a federal education program that's been in place for quite a long time, and it was reallocated with Perkins 5, and there was a nice influx of funds at that point to ensure that we invest in secondary, post-secondary, and adult career technical education programs. It's dedicated to continuous improvement of and relevancy of the career and technical education that meets those changing needs of our learners and our employers. And it increases access to high quality programs, including more emphasis on special populations. That was one of the things that Perkins 5 has done, including equity and accessibility. So when you look at what CTE is in Arkansas, you'll see that we have 64 programs of study. 96.9% of the graduates who are participating in CTE do graduate on time. I think that's an exceptional outcome for those students who participate in CTE. You'll also see credentials, that we have career coaches, all the different things that we're excited about offering within the state. So our funds here within Arkansas, as I said earlier, support those quality programs of study and professional development. So we're getting students engaged in student organizations and connecting them in the workplace with employers. Technical assistance for the people that are out in the field, creating the programs, understanding funding, those kinds of things. The career exploration, guidance and advisement, I think that is critically important, especially in our rural areas where students may not know what careers are out there outside of what they've seen just within their area. So I think that's critically important. We also do data collection and analysis, looking at how are we, how's our success? What are the things we need to focus more on? And looking at those program and plan evaluations and monitoring those to make sure we're meeting the needs of the state. And then stakeholder engagement. This is one of the things when I started working here, reviewing how the state plan was put together, the amount of stakeholder engagement was really overwhelming to me. I've worked other places where we've engaged stakeholders, but not to the extent, the number of meetings that were held across the state over several months, including people at the schools, parents, students, employers, state government, local government, all the different areas. There truly is a statewide incorporation of what the needs are, and then creating our plan to ensure those needs are addressed. So I talked a little bit about the number of programs we have in the occupational areas that kind of are overarching are agricultural science and technology. That is a huge area for the state and is expanding in some of our areas. Businessing and marketing technology, family and consumer sciences, STEM, and trade and industry. So our theory of getting, what we think into action is getting our division to align our support and services with the federal legislation, those student needs, state needs, employer needs, then getting middle school, high schools, and post-secondary institutions to implement those programs to help students get to the workplace. And then that moves into ensuring that our students are prepared for the 21st century careers, and the state's business and industries have the workers that they do need for us to stay economically sound and viable. Another thing that we're really proud of is when the state plan was submitted, that the Assistant Secretary of the Federal Department of the Office of Career Technical and Adult Education recognized our Unmanned Aerial System program that was piloted in 2018-2019. This is another one of those things that I didn't know was happening in our state. Our students that successfully complete that program, they have the opportunity to earn an FAA Part 107 licensure to use drones commercially, as well as engage in building, repairing, and flying drones. And any of you that are paying attention to what's going on with all the technology and the uses of drones, this is really exciting for our state. One of the things that is changing with Perkins 5 data reporting is that for the 2019-2020 fiscal year, it's considered that transition year, not necessarily for us, the Department of Education, but for Perkins, moving from Perkins 4 to Perkins 5. So the requirements are changing a little bit, and they're going to be unique for the 19-20 year. We will not be reporting any performance data on the core indicators for 2019. And this year, the 2019-2020 year, is where we're gathering that baseline data to establish performance levels as required under Perkins 5 moving forward. So that is the short and sweet update on Perkins 5, and I am happy to attempt to answer questions. I know that Jennifer can help, as well as Dr. Kramers and Sonia Wright-McMurray.
Thank you very much. Let me go through and we'll see if anyone has any questions. Ms. Flowers, do you have questions this morning? Okay.
No,
Ms.
I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Sanders?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Dr. Jeffcoat?
I do have one question. I know we talked a little bit about the concentrator modeling that we have, that we're going to have in place, and the data that we're not able to collect. Does that affect this system?
In terms of talking about data collection, in terms of
without in making any of the assumptions that we would pull from the data, does that change any of our planning for what we're doing in terms of Perkins?
I'll attempt to answer, and then I'll ask Dr. Kramers to back me up or correct me. It should not, because we actually, I've talked with Denise Irola over in OIE in Fayetteville, and we do have a lot of the information, and that is being used to create those standards. There's Dr. Kramers. Pop on in, please, and help answer that if you would. Can't hear you, Dr. Kramers.
Dr. Kramers, we're not hearing you.
I'm so glad I'm not the only one here having tech issues today.
Dr. Kramers, do you want me to jump in? Dr. Jeffcoat, we are able to produce the performance measures for everything but the 2020 academic performance measures because of the waiver of testing. But we still, because we have full data collection on students and courses and course credit earning, we're still able to figure out who's a concentrator, who's a completer, who's a participant. So the only impact we'll have is really on those academic performance measures, similar to what we had, in Essa, that we can't report on academics if we didn't give those assessments in 2020. But everything else is good to go. And we've actually got a lot of that already done. We're waiting on graduation rates, which will be completed here in December. And there's a couple that are the tricky ones, as Dr. Kramers knows, and Lydia and Jennifer are finding out that the post-secondary credentials, post-secondary industry credential and post-secondary placement, will be working on those as well. But we have the list of concentrators. We've got pretty much, I would say, 75% of what we would typically report will still be reported.
Great.
Thank you.
Ms. Bratton?
So I have a question. You talked about having emphasis on special populations, and so I was just curious, who are the special pops, and then can you give an example of something that y'all are doing or will be doing to reach those groups?
So our special populations include students who are homeless, students with disabilities. Dr. Kramers, I need help on what the other special populations are, and perhaps some of the programs we're doing currently.
So I was going to say, I also just pinch hitting in here for you, if it's okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Unlike what we've been used to through No Child Left Behind and Essa reporting on special populations, it's a little bit different for CTE. They've not really seen some of their data broken down into some of these groups. And so they actually get a breakdown now, and they'll be getting annual reports that will allow them to see students broken down by race, ethnicity, but then also broken down by the special populations. So we have, trying to get to my screen that has all of these lovely special populations. But they're going to be getting new reports that started in 2019 that for the first time are really going to show all of these different kids and how they're doing relative to the regular population. So they get a breakdown by gender, they get a breakdown by economically disadvantaged, English learners. We added former English learners, students with disabilities, migrant students, foster care, homeless, and military dependents. So some things that we're just starting to see in our Essa report card are being added into the CTE special populations. And for the first time, they'll see their performance measures, which includes their academics, graduation rate, non-traditional participation, post-secondary placement, we're still working on that one, and industry credential broken out by these different special populations. So for the first time, they'll get to actually see what does that look like and how are they doing relative to other students.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arola. As I said, I'm in just a month, so lots of things to learn, and I'm thrilled to be here. I have a great group of colleagues that are really committed to ensuring Arkansas is at the forefront of Perkins 5 programming, and the data collection piece is huge. Thank you so much.
I don't have any questions at the moment. Thank you. Anthony, do you have questions this morning?
I don't. Thank you.
Have I missed, Michelle, I see you there. Do you have any questions this morning?
I just want to make sure that I understand. So CTE completers will be an Essa indicator? No, we won't. Okay, thank you.
Did I miss anyone? Okay.
Yeah.
We're getting it situated this morning.
So what's up?
All right. All right. Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Excellent report.
Thank
All
you so
right.
much for the invitation.
Okay. We are going to move on now to our CARES Act update. Ms. Coughlin.
Morning, Deborah Coughlin for DESE. Just to give you a very quick update about the CARES Act, as you know, we were gifted with CARES Act fund, and that sent money to our school districts. Our school districts utilized those funds. There were 12 uses of funds dictated in the law, and our school districts have been reimbursed for a little less than half of that money at this point. Some of their things that they have purchased or have not been delivered, and therefore they can't make payment. We can't make reimbursement. So as soon as all of their devices are delivered, then we expect that balance to look a little different. One of the things that's really interesting about the CARES Act is we were given guidance by the U.S. Department of Ed regarding how to calculate equitable access, equitable services. And equitable services are the services that the public school provides to an eligible non-public school that wants to participate. So we followed that guidance, and then there were several lawsuits that, as a result of that guidance, that played themselves out across the nation. But one in particular that I've noted here in this Commissioner Memo 21-029 is that this final lawsuit was heard in federal court and did apply to all states. And so therefore, in September 25th, we released a commissioner memo and started doing professional development with our federal programs coordinators to let them know that we had to go back and recalculate the equitable services amount. Our finance team has been working on that, and we expect that to come out soon. We were waiting on a couple of last minute people to give us data. So never before have I ever worked in a federal program that had a change this significant in the middle of the funding cycle. But I have to tell you how proud I am of our Arkansans once again, because people just took it in stride. They've been kind, they've been nice, they've collaborated and worked together and made really wise decisions for kids. But this new allocation will be posted by our finance office. And what it really means is that there will be less, in most cases, less services going to the non-public school than was originally calculated. So they will make those adjustments and shift as they have always done before. What a great group to work with.
I think we've seen that through all this, how flexible and willing to work and do things that need to be done that educators across Arkansas are. So it's very much appreciated. Let's see if we have any questions. Anybody have questions about that?
A particular question, just a comment. I had a chance to talk with someone from a school district who was referring to the funding, and they were just really excited about that. So I can really say that it's going to make a really big difference looking forward to the school year.
Ms. Haywood, you have a question? Okay.
I don't, thank you.
Mr. Bennett? Okay. Let's see, who else do we have on? Ms. Bratton?
Do not.
Dr. Jeffcoat?
I don't have a question, but I'll make a comment too. I think probably one of the biggest challenges for us is finding the students that have always been in private schools that may live in our zone, but are attending a private school outside of our zone, and us just not being aware, but then being responsible for finding those kids. I don't know the answer to that yet, and I don't think anyone does, but it can be a challenge for us to try to locate kids, because obviously we don't have all that information on all of our kids in our zones, but that's a shared challenge across the state, and I'm sure the nation.
I'm sure, yes. Ms. Sanders?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Ms. Flowers?
It's compliments in reference to the CARES Act. Everybody in this area was highly pleased with it. One question, what was the determination as to the amount that each area received?
Ms. Flowers, can you get maybe closer to your microphone? We have trouble hearing your question.
What was the total, how was it determined the amounts that each district would receive in reference to the CARES Act?
How was the amount each district received determined?
So the original allocation of CARES Act funds to the district was determined by their Title I methodology. So just like they do it based on the census data. And then, as I explained, the equitable services has changed, but I think Dr. Jeffcoat makes a really good point of it is a challenge to always keep up with students as they move. We've heard stories of students that left the traditional public school, went to a non-public school, and then moved again to a different school. And when the traditional public school thinks they're in one spot and they've moved to another spot. So it really is a challenge to keep up, but our school districts have done an amazing job, and our partnership with ANSA, the non-crediting agency, for non-public schools has been amazing, but there are non-public schools that are not members of ANSA. So we've been able to find those, even have webinars with them, and they've been amazing to work with as well. So just overall, making the best of a sometimes difficult situation.
Yes. All right, did I miss anyone? Anyone else have a question?
Miss Newton, I did think of a question. Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
So what if non-public schools have already spent the funds? Does anybody have an answer for that one?
Ms.
Yes.
Coffin.
So we have been working with our federal programs coordinators, and in some instances that may be the case. When the new allocation comes out, the allocation of services, and remember, no money goes to a non-public school. The LEA is responsible for the funds. They only provide the service to the non-public. So the non-public may have expended the services that were allocated for them. And so that's a conversation where the LEA is working with the non-public, but our first duty is to do no harm to children. So the guidance that we've been giving is that have a conversation. We're not going to rip devices out of kids' hands. We're not going to take things away. We've all been through COVID-19 together, and our job is to serve kids. So that's our first job, and then we'll work on the tiny details later on. And both parties have been excellent to work with on both sides, non-public and public.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I do have one more question, and it's really not regarding this CARES Act funding, but I know that the CARES Act Steering Committee allocated $20 million for emergency leave for teachers this year, or at least through December. And as we get closer to the end of December, I don't know if anyone knows the status of those funds and how that's gone, and if there was enough money. I think there was a lot of extra money. A few months ago, it was mentioned that we had not expended as much as we were anticipating, and they were looking at some options. I think Secretary Key was visiting with the steering committee about having extra funds and then what we would do with those funds. Just curious, since that there is a deadline looming, and I don't know if anyone on this Zoom would have any insight.
Dr. Pfeffer is here. She's going to come to the microphone and answer your question.
Great.
Okay, good morning. So Dr. Jeffcoat, that's a good question. We are monitoring those funds. Okay. I'm not logged in. Okay, does that work?
Yes.
We are monitoring those funds. I think at the last data pool, there was still about $10 million that was remaining in the funds, but the requests that come in, it's about $1 million in reimbursement per week. So we're looking at the end of the semester and projecting out possibly what could be anticipated as far as remaining funds that are not going to be needed. Of course, that could change after the Thanksgiving break and as we come back, and districts are going through the next few weeks. We don't exactly know what that will look like. So we're working right now to establish that final timeline when we need all of that information sent to us. And then the CARES Act committee will be discussing then how to handle any remaining funds. So we still don't have all the details, but are working on it.
Well, I want to just extend my appreciation. And I know I speak on behalf of all school systems. We appreciate that allocation, and it has definitely been a great support for us over this semester. And I don't know if there's the possibility that any funds could be made available for next semester. I don't think that the way that these funds are allocated, that's a possibility, but definitely appreciate the department's work to provide that support for our schools this semester.
And you are correct that those funds do expire. And so currently there are not funds available for this purpose after the calendar year. That also could change as we know with decisions that'll be made at the federal level. And I appreciate the kind words. I also want to just go back and also say this was with the support of the governor. He listened to teachers early on about concerns that they had, and leave was really something they were concerned about and worried about having to exhaust all of their accumulated leave early on. So I think having that support from all levels and working together is what really has helped us to have a successful semester so far. And we know how hard it's been. We know how hard all of you are working, and I don't want to minimize that in any way. But it takes all of these supports together to make it a little bit easier.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Have I missed anyone? Ms. Sanders, I don't know if you, Ms. Flowers, I can't remember.
No, ma'am, I have no questions. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else have a question on the CARES Act? Okay, we're going to move on and get our Essa updates. Ms. Kaufman.
So on the agenda today, I posted a link to our Essa page where all information regarding Essa is posted. And if you click on that link, you'll know that we did submit waivers for assessment, for accountability, for federal programs. We submitted several of those and were approved, and they're all posted on our website. What I also wanted to bring to your attention was that we did create a document called The Impact of COVID-19 on 2020 State and Federal Accountability and Reporting, that outlines the full impact on all of the different programs. And that document is linked here, but is also posted on the informational documents page. So as a result of this, what does all this mean? Well, we did not assess in the spring of 2020, therefore we could not calculate an Essa School Index, as you know. And therefore, here we are in November, and we would normally be looking at Essa School Index scores and letter grades and all of those things, but we don't have those. So we've tried to kind of put this impact of COVID-19 document in all of those blank spaces in time where we would normally have a new year of data to look at. So I just wanted to kind of bring that to your attention. This is a very thorough and complex document as you read through, but we just tried to put it all in one place so that the public would have it and we could refer back to it sometime down the road. If we ever forget that there was a pandemic, we can go, what happened to the data in 2020? And we'll have a placeholder that reminds us of the whole story.
Does anyone have a question on this particular document and its impact? One question I had was just that we've seen there are no changes to the schools that are identified this year going into this next year. About how many schools were impacted by that they are kind of in a hold?
So we identified 42 schools in need of comprehensive support, and I'd have to go look 100 and something in additional targeted support. And they just, in essence, that year just pushed everything forward. And we'll get into that a little bit in the next presentation. But for the ones who qualify for 1003 grants, it's allowed them to have money a little longer.
Oh,
So it's been a positive for them. And I think because Arkansas does not consider in need of comprehensive support or additional target support as a label, that hopefully there's not been a negative effect on our school districts, but instead a positive effect of support, and they've been eligible for the professional development that the district support team has provided. Our agencies provided a lot of professional development, so it just really has given them more time
Okay.
to meet the needs of kids.
So it's actually been a positive for them then.
I would hope they would see it that way. I'm not sure that I could speak to everyone regarding that.
Okay.
One note that I might also provide is if you were looking at page 3 in the attachment, the impact of COVID, we will post a report card for 2020. We are still required to do that. And if you're looking on page 3, you'll see in that middle column, impact on the LEA, there is guidance, U.S. Department of Ed, non-regulatory guidance for school report cards, and you'll see original document. And then below it, what you will see is a Google Drive where the school performance team went through under the direction of Louis Farron and went through every section of that guidance and said, those waivers that we talked about, did those waivers cause that section to be waived or not waived? And
Okay.
so that's very important to know, because some people will ask us, will this data be on the report card? So that's our reference point to go back to each time. We do have to have all of the components listed in our report card, but there will be a lot of NAs,
Right.
data not available. But if data are available, then it certainly will be provided appropriately.
Okay.
And that will be, we're waiting on completing graduation rate corrections for the 2020 graduation rate. That's a part, you have to have current year graduation rate. And so as soon as we get that all finished and sent to Argent, I'm sure we'll be getting the report card out very soon. The interesting thing is we've heard from school districts, hey, where's the report card? Because they're so used to having something in October now, they
Right.
expect to have it. They forget that the report card doesn't come till later.
Yeah.
So we'll be getting that out as quickly as possible.
Okay, good. All right. Any questions along those lines?
Ms. Kaufman, this is Starlinda Sanders. Just, you made passing reference to a 1003 grant. And I don't recall hearing that before, so it may have another name that I'm familiar with. What is that?
So the 1003 grant is a sub-grant under Title I. And the 1003 grant is dedicated to, every school has to set up criteria, but it's dedicated to schools that were identified in need of comprehensive support. You know, the lowest performing 5%, which is 42 is the lowest, is the 5% number, 42 schools. So we have to identify the lowest performing 5%, identify any high school that has a graduation rate below 66.667%. And then we also have to identify any school that had a persistently underperforming subgroup. And our definition in our plan, our approved Essa plan, during that first year of identification, any district that had 3 years of persistently underperformance subgroup was identified as additional targeted support. So in our criteria for providing 1003 grants, if a district had a school in need of comprehensive support and schools in need of additional targeted support, they were eligible for a 1003 grant. It's a federal grant and it's very targeted. The schools must use the money on evidence-based practices. So it's a very tightly governed, and our district support team works directly with them.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, Ms. Kaufman, I think we're ready to move on to the advisory groups.
Thank you. So our ESSA advisory groups, as you know, a part of our approved ESSA plan is that we continue to seek stakeholder feedback continuously, not just at the beginning when we wrote the original plan, but I think we've done an exceptional job of reaching out to our stakeholders throughout the implementation of our plan. And so I've got the list here, and Ms. Newton, if you'll just call on those individually, they will address. But we've really kind of think about how do we ensure that we continue the implementation of our ESSA plan as we have it written, and what communication does the public need to know? So that's really our lens for this morning is what are the things that we need to think about as we're developing a good, solid communication plan for this year. Okay.
All right. Okay, so I think first we're going to hear from Ms. Green on district support.
Good morning, Ms. Newton. Jane Green, Coordinator of District Support, Title I. I met with my district support advisory group yesterday. I had 16 people on that team. Basically, the agenda that I gave to them was we talked about accountability and assessment and the fact that we would assess and calculate index scores this year. And I also explained to them, which didn't take an explanation because, you know, they realized it, is that the state is not the one that chooses whether to assess or not. That's a federal requirement. So we have to assess. And I know all of you are seeing it out there. There's lots of parents or staff sometimes that says, you know, the state ought to waive the assessment, but we can't. That's a federal requirement. But we talked about that yesterday, and I asked them what were some of the concerns that they were hearing or that they had themselves in regard to accountability and assessment. And I took the 4 major ones that I think we heard continuously from more than one member. The first one being the fact of trying to reach that 95% tested. They were concerned about that because of the number of students that they had that were virtual. And some of those districts right now are, when they're giving their interim assessments, they have students that aren't coming in to take those. So they're a little concerned about how they're going to get students in to take the actual test when it comes to the assessment. So that was a common concern across all the members, was that 95%. But another one of their concerns was, how do we get that concern out to the parents, how important that 95% is? And we talked about that a little bit into the communication. How do we communicate that to the parent or to the community? They had some concerns about the fact that the ESSA index gaps, they thought they were going to continue to grow because of the number of kids they had face-to-face versus the number of kids they also had virtual. And another one of the big concerns was the flexibility window of the assessment. They're worried about what if, Rachel, I can't even remember how long the assessment window is, but you know, what if they're 5 weeks? What if they're shut down 2 weeks because, you know, they're quarantined? Or what if they've got several students that are out for quarantine? So that they were a little worried about that, if there was going to be any flexibility in that testing window. Additionally, they had some concerns about training staff to give those assessments, because they were afraid that they may train all their staff and then they may have 5 people that's quarantined. So they were thinking ahead, thinking, well, they may have to train 5 people deep, you know, to be prepared to give those assessments. And of course, they're saying it's hard to find people now to train. So all of those are very valid concerns that they had. But I also asked them about the communication piece. How do we put that, how do we communicate these concerns? So, and you see Chelsea on here, they really think that we need to involve that parent family engagement platform to help have Chelsea's group help put that out and explain to the parents the importance of the 95% testing. Also, they had some recommendations on, of course, the commissioner's memos communicating. There's a Facebook page some of you may be aware of about, it's an AMI for teachers, I believe, that they had suggested maybe we could put that out on there. So they came up with some very good suggestions on way to communicate some suggestions on some of these concerns that they had. That's pretty much what we discussed yesterday. If any of you have any questions, I will certainly try to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Emma, do you have questions? Okay. Ms. Flowers? Ms. Sanders? Dr. Jeffcoat?
I don't have any questions, again, a comment, but I think that there is valid concern about not being able to pull in 95% of your virtual students. I know that that will be a challenge. I do think that having 5 weeks, a window of 5 weeks does help us to remedy that and accomplish pulling in 95%. And we have a lot of flexibility as well. So I think that the 95% is something we can accomplish, but it will be a challenge for our students that are enrolled in virtual. And I think that for testing purposes, it is important for us to get back to testing, to get back to that point where we can measure our overall academic achievement of our students in our districts. It allows us as a district to compare the programs. So we have today all across the state, we have in-person learning and virtual learning going on. Well, this is a great opportunity for us to look at that data to determine a level of effectiveness and any modifications or changes that we need to make. So no questions, but just wanted to make that comment.
Okay, good, very good. Ms. Bratton?
No questions.
Let's see if I skipped it. Michelle?
I don't have any, thanks.
Mr. Bennett?
I don't, thank you.
Okay, all right. Did I miss anyone? All right. Thank you, Ms. Green. Ms. Kerr, English learners.
Hi, yes, I'm Tricia Kerr. I'm the ESOL Program Director and Title III Co-Coordinator with DESE. I'm going to share my screen. I believe you have this in your agenda posted. I wanted to make sure we're seeing the same thing. The English Learner Title III Advisory Group, we met more in the spring and summer than we have since then, but we have been extremely busy responding to the, as everyone else has been, to the ongoing needs and situation regarding COVID. One of our biggest impacts on us has been, well, how do you identify who an English learner is? Because we do have a screener that we give to all new students to our districts that does require face-to-face screening. So that has been one of the big impacts that we've been dealing with, as well as, you know, how do we exit students and monitor them when we haven't had ACT Aspire. So I'm just sharing a few resources here. You can go look at it further. One tool we developed was the English Learner Ready for Learning Considerations, where we really walk through some exit monitoring criteria, suggestions for when you don't have ACT Aspire scores from spring 2020, what do you look at? And if anything, it's helped us emphasize that we were never supposed to be just using ELPA 21 and ACT Aspire. Yes, to exit, always ELPA 21. And we were fortunate we finished the ELPA 21 window last spring before everything happened. But the other piece, just to remind you of how a student exits being an English learner, is they have to have 2 pieces of data that show they're performing at a level comparable to English only peers as far as academic language usage. So some of the data that can be used for that is ACT Aspire, but other data are common formative assessments, reading inventory, math inventory, all STAR reading, interim assessments, There's a wide variety of assessments that can be used. So we kind of walk through how you could do that with what is available. And one thing we emphasize is please do not bring a student back into English Learner Services for monitoring because you don't have any data to look at. So we've really been trying to work with districts one by one, and how do you do that when you don't have the data you're used to having. And we also emphasize how important it is to communicate with families, and with many of our families, language is a barrier. So we've given different examples of ways you can overcome that, which we've always supposed to have been doing, but this COVID experience and the importance of communicating with families about what they should do to keep themselves safe, as well as what's going on at school, I think has really brought to the forefront in some of our districts with these students the importance of communicating with families in a language they can understand. So that tool covers that. But one of the things that started happening is because we have to have a consistent way to identify students who are English learners, normally that's the Alpha 21 screener. The US Department of Ed released some guidance to us in May that said we could use other methods if we were consistent statewide, and then eventually also have our students complete the original plan of a screener. So we have identified a provisional or presumptive English learner identification process that students who are virtual with a language other than English who cannot participate face-to-face in the Alpha 21 screener, they can go through this process, which is basically an interview with the student and just rating their responses to determine what level of support they might need as an English learner. These students were still reported as and served as an English learner in eSchool and in their services. They must still complete the Alpha 21 screener when they're able to do so face-to-face. This year so far, we've had 18 districts that had to use this procedure with 94 students. To put that in perspective, we screened new students to Arkansas, which a lot of these are kindergartners, 6,066 students with Alpha 21 screener. So only 94 out of 6,066, that's 1.5% of the students we had to screen this fall so far fell within this group. And they're having to report to my office 3 times throughout the school year. They've already done it once for cycle 2 time period. They'll do it again at the end of the Alpha 21 window. So we'll know who is falling within this category at that time, and as well as at the end of the year. Part of that spreadsheet they submit to me will include, when able to, the results from their actual Alpha 21 screener. Then the next piece, we've been processing applications for Title III. We just have one district that we're still working on getting some pieces finalized with. We now have 52 districts participating in that program, which is the federal program for Title IV English learners. We have received 209 English learner plans for non-Title III districts, and my 5 EL specialists and I are in the process of reviewing those right now. I've already been using some information from those to provide technical assistance to districts already, but our goal is to have these finished by the end of December, and at least the initial round of feedback provided to schools on those plans. We're also in the process of awarding the Title III Recent Immigrant Grant. That's a federal grant based on their Cycle 2 data of who has an increase in recent immigrants from the prior 2 years. And then we've also implemented, which is the EL risk assessment, which has been informed by a lot of feedback with the English Learner Title III Advisory Group. And my specialists and I are providing intense support to 22 districts based on the results of that risk assessment. And the final thing related to what we've been working with and keeping you informed of, we are members of a competitive grant for state assessment program on evaluating our English language progress model, seeing how well the ELP indicator is working to see if we're really measuring what we think we're measuring. We have completed the first year of that grant with the states listed there, which was mainly data gathering, the initial set of data for the team, the researchers to analyze. Year 2 includes a survey regarding the quality and the type and some qualitative information about the language instruction education programs that are delivered throughout the state. And I'm meeting with a group tomorrow of DESE staff to determine the best way to implement that survey. That's what we've been up to in the English learner world related to our ESSA implementation.
It sounds like y'all have been very busy. So we appreciate your hard work and all the adjustments that you've had to do on behalf of students as the year started. I'll open it back up to questions. We'll start with you, Ms. Bratton.
I don't have any questions. Just,
Okay.
you know, it has been a lot of work and just really excited to continue down this path. I know that through this year of COVID, it's been difficult, and that's one of the difficulties we're seeing, you know, in our district with all students, but especially like our emerging speakers, and really getting them to virtually learn. And so I know that that work is still ahead, and we're trying to do a good job.
And I'm sure you are. Ms. Haywood,
I don't have any questions. Thanks.
Mr. Bennett,
I don't have any questions.
Ema.
That's not a question. I just out of curiosity, do you find that majority of the ESL or English ELL students this semester learning virtually are looking forward to, you know, that transition as far as like the spring semesters and coming back in person? The level of support, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out. Is that, are they more inclined to wanting to have a physical level of support, or to remain virtual with the level of support at the district's level?
Well, one piece of data I've looked at is we have 18.5% of our English learners are currently participating in virtual, whereas the former English learners, they're no longer English learners, almost 24% are doing virtual. So we do see fewer English learners participating in virtual than otherwise. We have more on site than former English learners. I would have to look at the data for the whole state to see how that compares to regular or non-ELs. I don't use the term regular for that. But I know I've heard from districts that it is the biggest challenge for us is teaching language is you need to be able to interact. You cannot learn to write in a language until you can speak in that language. The only way you can learn to speak is if you have opportunities for highly engaged interaction, participation. And that is very challenging in the virtual environment. Right now, it's also challenging in the on-site environment because of the parameters that we have to do to keep students safe. I know teachers are looking forward to having kids back face-to-face. And, you know, I'm not sure I completely answered your question, but Melissa might have insight into that because she's actually at a district responsible for that.
Yeah, we're seeing what started to be a higher percentage of our Ls started virtually, and that's all grade levels. And then we began to see that shift over October back to an in-person, and that was either for the secondary students was because they knew that they could get more in person, and then for the elementary students it was more that parents couldn't provide the support at home that the students needed and wanted them to come back in person to receive that support.
Those are the reports I've been hearing. So.
And Tricia, it's your non-English learners, 62% are face-to-face, cycle 2 data. 69% of your English learners are face-to-face. So you definitely have more English learners choosing to be face-to-face, and about equal on the hybrid, and 7% less on the virtual for the English learners.
Yep, that matches up with former EL versus EL. I just didn't have all the other to look at. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Jeffcoat,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Sanders,
No, thank you.
Ms. Flowers. Okay. Did I
No,
miss
thank you.
anyone? Okay, all right. Thank you, Ms. Kerr.
Thank you.
We'll move on to educator equity and effectiveness. Don't see. There she is. Ms. Saracini? Saracini? I don't see her on here.
Yes,
There you
Am I-
are. I was looking for you. I couldn't find you.
that's okay. May I share my screen, please?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about we've had part of the Essa is the tests and leads summative ratings. And so we have put some guidance out on this. And so I'm just going to kind of go over that with you real quickly. We sent out a commissioner's memo, and this is the link to the commissioner's memo. And it's really to provide districts that flexibility regarding educators that are in that summative rating year. This was a waiver that started back in the spring, and it's carried on up till this time. But we all know that there are reasons that we do need to continue with some summative ratings. And so we had some feedback from some administrators so that how could districts move forward with the summative ratings and try to look at rotating, because the law is every 4th year. And so they wanted to make sure that 4 years from now, we don't have a huge amount of people needing a summative or either next year or the following years. So we've tried to put out as much guidance on this as we can. But of course, we know that there are going to be summatives needed for people that are on an improvement plan or for employment reasons. Also, teachers will need summatives that are up for national board because they have to have a summative rating within the last 3 years. And we also know if anyone's going for a designation on the career continuum for a master teacher or a lead teacher, they will also need recent summative rating. But these are things that they can talk with their administrators with and carry on with doing what's needed for those summative ratings for those teachers that want to advance. But we are trying to put out as much guidance as we can. We also have a 1-pager that goes over everything. Also, we have done some webinars. Andy Sullivan, who is the director of licensure, he has done some excellent videos that are out there and explaining, and he's also done some Zooms webinars so that he can have feedback from those administrators. But we know that for summative ratings for the 2021 school year is optional. Part of our ESSA is still the ratings for those that are ineffective. And again, that will be your teachers and leaders that fall into that, that are on a improvement plan. And so that's in a nutshell. Please, if you have any questions regarding why a teacher may need a summative, again, those are for those designations and also for teacher assignment. And it's pretty much straightforward. This, we have already posted this particular PowerPoint.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Does anyone have a question? Okay, I think your presentation was very clear and easy to understand, so I think you did a good job.
Okay, well, thank you. And no, if you do have any questions or concerns, always contact myself or Andy Sullivan. Will be happy to help.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. All right, assessment, Ms. Horn.
Good morning. I'm going to share my screen
There
as
you are.
well. And I want to thank Jane for sharing the concerns of her group.
Speak up or get a little closer.
Are you able to hear me now? Is that better? Okay, good. I want to thank Ms. Green for sharing the concerns of her advisory group. We know that there are some concerns about how the logistics of assessment will work for this year. And I know Melissa can also speak to some of the work that has already gone on from district test coordinators. I just wanted a quick reminder, we do have the same assessment windows that we had when we published these dates last spring. And so this is just a reminder of those testing windows, but I do want to talk about some of those concerns that Jane mentioned. I will say, as with all things this year, districts are learning a lot in how we can structure our logistics and how we can approach things differently. Because our districts have been testing, whether that's through ACT Aspire interim assessments or our K2 assessments or our 3.8 Ready for Learning assessments, they do have some experience now in how to meet the needs of those remote learners. And so we've seen a lot of creative approaches to the logistics of assessment. And so I think districts will use what they're learning in the fall and winter to then have a successful administration in the spring. We won't have any remote options for the spring like we did in the fall and winter windows. And so that will be something that districts may need to adjust to. But again, and Melissa, you can speak to this in a bit, districts are meeting the needs of their students who are remote locally, and that will look different in every district. So Jane, thank you for those concerns. One of the things that we do want to address as well, for those concerns about perhaps needing a pivot during the test window, we really want to encourage our districts to test as early in the window as possible. We did have some districts with our fall K2 window that did experience a pivot, but because they had decided to test late in the window, they ended up pivoting during their anticipated testing time. So one of the approaches that we would recommend is to test early in the window. That will cause some flexibility to be needed in districts. Typically, many districts will spread out their assessment windows throughout those 5 weeks. But what we don't want is to wait until the end of that 5-week window and then end up needing a pivot. And so we just would really encourage districts, if their infrastructure would allow, if their staffing will allow, if their devices will allow, to test as early in that window as possible. And so I would love to field any questions.
Does anyone have a question on assessment? Okay, I'm not hearing any. So,
Ms. Newton?
yes.
You might want to call on Dr. Arola. She has
Okay.
a really good story of some students that she's familiar with and their recent testing experience that I think is just a positive of what our schools are doing.
Okay, Dr. Rolla?
Well, when we had our advisory team meeting, this issue also came up, so Tammy will be reporting on that as well. But just the contrast, one of the things that I've been learning from the families that I've been interacting with and my own experience with my granddaughter, how important the relationship with the family matters, but also the communication around the things that are keeping families from feeling like it's safe to bring their child back to school. And so one of the things that we talked about was this possibility of maybe surveying parents and finding out, what are your barriers? What are your concerns? Because the contrast story that I had mentioned was, in one case, we've got a remote learner who has a interaction with her teacher with half a class once a week and doesn't have any real individual interaction. So there's not a big relationship there with the virtual teacher. And then the parents only interact via email. And so there's not this sense of, oh, I've got this great relationship with the school. They're going to be responsive to my needs. my kid's going to be safe when they go to get their, go to take their testing. In contrast, another family was telling me how it was so easy for them to go into the school and bring their remote child in for virtual, or their virtual child in for testing for the fall interims, because the school had reached out and given them all this information, how many kids would be in the room, their protocols for hand washing, for mask wearing, what they would be doing in the case of certain contingencies happening. And this particular parent has a child who's highly allergic to peanuts. And on top of all the other things to do with COVID, for this particular parent to feel safe taking their child to the school to be tested on the MAPS test was just a testament to the relationship that the child had with their virtual teacher and that the parent had with the school, with the child's virtual teachers, as well as the school administration. And so I just think it's really important to recognize that parents do have valid concerns. They may be health concerns, they may be supporting their learner concerns, and that if we understand those in advance and we can intentionally build that relationship in an informed way so that parents have that, like they can reach out and say, I'm really worried about X, and the administration or the teacher they have the trust in them because of the relationship to feel like those concerns will be addressed in bringing their remote learner in for testing. I just think that's super critical.
Yes, I think that's a testament for our educators that if we are doing what we need to do, that we realize that whether it's face-to-face or virtual, the key to educating a child is relationships with the students, relationships with the parents, relationships with the community. Those relationships are vital. So I thank you. That's a great example.
I agree, Denise. And I will say when our office fielded some phone calls from concerned parents, it absolutely was that communication piece that needed a little support. In speaking with superintendents across the state, that's one piece of learning that they had as a takeaway is we needed to communicate things more clearly in terms of what those protocols and safety measures are that are in place, so the parents can be comfortable bringing their students to school, which then supports that effort toward meeting that 95% tested rate. So thank you for that as well. And I think that kind of goes toward those adjustments that districts are making, because we have tested throughout the year thus far. And so we do have some pieces of learning that we can take away from that. So thank you.
Very good. Does anyone have a question for Ms. Horner or Dr. Rowland? Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to accountability. I'm going to butcher your name, I'm sure, Ms. Rettinger.
You were perfect.
Okay, all right.
Good morning. My name is Tammy Rettinger, and I'm coordinator of school performance in the accountability division. And I met with our Essa Accountability Advisory team last week. And our goal basically was just to have a conversation and put everyone at ease and really see what their communication needs were. And we talked about there wouldn't be a waiver for accountability. So what are your concerns and what do you need? And we had over 27 members from all across the state. So I thought we had a really good representative group that could give us different ideas. But overwhelmingly, this group, they want to test. They need that data to see where their students are and to see where their largest needs are. How do we take care of these kids? And really, how did we come through COVID? And what do we need to do to move forward? So overwhelmingly, they want to test. But with that, a couple of concerns that they have, and I feel like needs that they're saying, please help us, develop some communication. And I hate to say the main one, but was the concern with A to F. How will A to F be misused in the community or through stakeholders or wherever? Because you know, of course, they listed their concerns. We have virtual students. The opportunity to learn look different for all students. So A to F and the misuse of that is something that they were concerned about. Another one, I think Jane and several people, Rachel, we've talked about, you know, how do you get 95% of your students testing? And I think for some districts, that's not going to be a problem. They'll have more than 95% of their students testing. But for some districts, that will be a concern. And their concerns are, how do we make parents feel safe, that their child will be safe if they come to school to assess? And I agree, Ms. Newton, that building that relationship and making that parent feel comfortable is the key. But I think some districts are still struggling with how to make that happen. Either logistically, how do we fit these kids in the building and make it happen, or provide that level of comfort for our parents. So those were two of the biggest concerns I think that our group kept coming back to. And we talked about other things, but these were the main topics of our conversation. And looking at, and as Denise said, looking at surveying some parents to see what are your concerns about bringing your student in to assess in the spring, and giving districts some tools, really, okay, if these are your concerns, then this is what we can put in place to make you feel more comfortable. But that's basically, we just had a conversation, tried to make them feel comfortable and share some of their concerns with us.
I think those are the ones that are coming up over and over in every group that we're seeing that we need to do a good job communicating with. Ms. Flowers, do you have questions?
No, thank you.
Ms. Sanders?
No, thank you.
Dr. Jeffcoat?
You know, I'll just say that I earlier advocated for testing because we need to for so many different reasons, but I also have that same concern of what those results are going to look like. And I think that's a shared concern across the state, obviously, if that's what you're hearing with your different groups that you've met with. And I don't know the answer to that. I think we're all in the same boat in that regard, though. I do feel like, though, the pandemic will have a negative effect on our performance. Obviously, just local data that we have today shows that we have some areas that we're struggling in that we feel like typically we would not have struggled in. So I do think that's a concern. Hopefully, though, that we have a lot of time before we get to that point where A to F, those results are shared, and hopefully we can find a solution to remedy that concern.
Yeah. And I think part of it is realizing what the concerns are. And if we know ahead of time, then maybe we can do something to address those concerns with the 95% and with the ADF. So, you know, hopefully we'll have some people looking at that in the next few months. We'll see. Emma.
Ms. Newton, could I say one other thing about the 95%?
Ms. Horn, sorry, go ahead.
I do want to provide some assurances as well. A lot of the calls that my office fielded from concerned parents for our younger students, as you might imagine, there is an increased level of fear for parents of younger students for bringing those students on site for testing. But I will say that we did have strong numbers of percent tested in our fall window. And so I think as parents are able to see that schools are taking seriously the need to communicate and to provide those safety measures for students, I think parents will begin to feel more comfortable. And so I feel strongly that those participation numbers will only go up as we move from fall into spring, because we do know the importance of having those data to measure student progress and learning. So I do want to just provide some assurance that we did still have strong numbers, even in that youngest age group for our assessments.
Dr. Arola, do you have anything to add along those lines?
No, not at this time. Well, and this is where I will say, you know, we're thinking about percent tested as well. And it's one of those things that it is really important, just because we do want to make sure we understand our full population. But I believe we'll talk a little bit more about that, right, Ms. Kaufman? So I'll wait till then.
Ms. Newton, I just want to add, as Dr. Arola shared that example, I was thinking if we could maybe model some great examples from either the elementary and the secondary level, perhaps have even videos or things to share with parents that can kind of keep them at ease to know these are some sample, models of schools in the state who are doing such a great job with encouraging safe testing. And that might be something we can maybe display on our websites or social media for parents to see.
What a great idea. Thank you for that. As I see Ms. Kaufman fiercely writing, so I think she's got that one down. Good job. Mr. Bennett.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Haywood?
No questions, thanks.
All right. Ms. Bratton?
Yeah, I think we shared here in the district, we shared that concern that we weren't going to reach the 95% tested. And here we took the opportunity of extending our district window out just a little bit for our last assessment. And we hit 95% in every school or over. And that was kind of, to be honest, a little shocking because we thought just the chaos of it, just the work that goes into calling families and making them feel comfortable and telling them this is how we're going to test them. They will be alone if that's what you need, whatever it is that you need, that's what we'll provide. And so we actually had lower numbers of those even testing virtually or remotely. So the majority of the students did come in that were virtual.
Great. That's great news to hear. It's very encouraging. Very encouraging. All right. Any other comments or questions along accountability? Okay. Ms. Kaufman, next steps. I think there's going to be some big ones. So let's see where we're going from here.
Thank you. I think what you just heard from these advisory group reports really kind of sets the stage. What is the temperature of the community? What are the things that we have concerns about? Because there are so many unknowns, how do we communicate to make people as comfortable as possible with the knowns so that we can prepare for the unknowns? So I want to take a moment just to kind of bring us back to previous conversations about our ESSA plan. And before the outbreak of the pandemic, we were having conversations about our timeline and did we want to amend our plan to include additional data points. And so one of the things that we had discussed was now with our Perkins 5 plan that maybe we wanted to put some completer information or concentrator information into our ESSA plan. And we had put that, if you recall, our stakeholders recommended that from the very beginning, but we did not have that data available. So the first thing I just want to start there is Dr. Arola has examined that data, and because the Perkins 5 is brand new, you heard them present for early on that they just got 2019 baseline, and then we would have had 2020 data, but we don't. And so our recommendation at this time is to not amend our plan for a number of reasons. One, we have not had that CTE data long enough to learn about it. We're just now seeing it for the first time, and by not having that second year of data, we don't know that much about it yet. And before we would put that into an accountability system other than the one that's already in place for Perkins, would not be a real date. We're not making a data-driven decision. And so moving forward, I would recommend that that's how we always want to go, is utilizing our data study to make a wise decision. So at this time, that would be my recommendation to the committee. Also, we discussed that possibly we would look to more indicators, more components to go into the SQSS indicator that included elementary. More seems very high school heavy. At this time, we have not identified any that will meet the criteria, the federal criteria to be included. So once again, we need to study other states to see if they're adding anything. What we're hearing from other states is some of them had in their original plans gotten things like discipline approved or surveys, engagement, things like that, and they've struggled. And so we, once again, want to make a data-driven decision. And so I think I would recommend that we take the time to learn from other states about those things, those additional things that they put in and how well they've been received and utilized. So I'd like to stop there and just see if there's any comment. Is that a consensus of the committee?
Does anyone have a comment or a question along those lines?
I do. This is Starlinda Sanders. I do have one question. How often do we reevaluate changing our ESSA plan? I know just like with COVID, there are some things that really necessitate a change, but how often is that looked at, Ms. Kaufman?
So we keep an eye on it every year in our office to make sure that everything is working appropriately. Dr. Arola is constantly modeling the data, examining the data, and as you know, on the informational documents page that we put out end of the year statistical reports, and we're sharing our data with our technical advisory committee at least quarterly to examine our data. When we come to you, to the steering committee, I mean, that's a constant conversation that we're having about is, is there a point to have an amendment? The reason that we're always cautious about amendment is because if you are listening to administrators and teachers talk about the progress they're making with their PLC and the impact that they're seeing in their students, they really rely on the stability of our index because they're using that as a part of their communication of, look at the data. Here's what's happening. Our school improved here. Our school did this. And that type of consistency over time is just so powerful for our educators. So we do look at it all the time. We're just cautious about changing because every little change has some significance.
And, I'm not in a district day to day anymore, but I know that right now teachers and administrators and educators have so much to deal with in just the day to day things, and throwing a change in right now, I just don't think is a smart thing to do. I know some of you members are in districts, so maybe you could give us your thoughts.
I'll just chime in and say that I'm a big fan of stability. I really like it. And you've highlighted all the reasons that we probably don't need to make any changes today. So I support your recommendations of no amendments at this time.
Okay.
I will back that up, Dr.
Me too. I would say that my teachers would be very grateful if we didn't make substantial changes.
Okay. All right.
Oh, I would agree 150%. I'm just trying to wrap my head around when we are on the other side of this, when do we reevaluate? So that's sort of what I was getting at. I would echo all of you in that same vein. Less is best at this point.
Right. Okay. All right. I'm seeing lots of yeses and nodding of heads, so I think that we have a consensus on that to just stay the course for now. Ms. Flowers, did you have a comment?
I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay. All right. Okay.
All right. I'll take that as unanimous consensus from this team. So what I'd like to do now is kind of take us to where we are right now. And in looking at our Essa index and Essa updates, I would start just by reminding you that this full presentation is posted on the agenda, but our ESSA plan is posted on there as well. So we encourage you, if you've not looked at it lately and you don't carry it around with you everywhere you go like we do, you're welcome to join our fan club. But it is posted on our ESSA page. And in that plan, I just wanted to kind of put this together. I had to kind of put it together and help myself kind of stay on track. And in 2018, we identified, we put our plan into place, we were approved, and we identified our lowest performing school districts, all students in need of comprehensive support and improvement. As you know, 5% is 42. Sometimes those schools will close or consolidate or merge or do something along the way, but we do keep up with that. And the next identification cycle would have been 2021 data. Notice at the top of this slide, I've put it by data because it gets so confusing with school years. And I've caught myself 2 or 3 times confusing myself. And so I thought this is a way I can post this that we're all very, very clear. So utilizing that 2018 data, we identified schools. In 2019, that would have been the first year to meet the exit criteria. And we did have 31 out of our, it ended up being 41 schools that year that had been identified in need of comprehensive support that met the first year of exit criteria. And the 2020 data would have been their opportunity to exit. But if they had met the second year of exit criteria. If not, they could have exited in 2021 before we have the new identification. But because we did receive a waiver of assessment in 2020 and accountability, basically what that looks like is this, that the 2020 year when there was not complete data, and we did have some data, but we basically, in essence, just moved forward. We skipped a year. Now, we still have to calculate graduation rates. As Tricia said, we were able to complete the ELPA 21, so we do have data, but we were unable to calculate an ESSA school index. So without that data, you can't meet criteria for exit or identification. So in essence, what I've done here in this visual is show you that everything just moved over a year. So now it would be 2020 data that we would use to have the next round of identification year. And our schools still have the same length of time, the same opportunities to exit with the 21 data or the 22 data. And those 1003 dollars will just continue as we have seen in the support from our district support team did continue. So we are now pressed with a question, and the U.S. Department of Ed has opened up the window for addendums and amendments. An addendum is kind of a fast way, and they have given us a really quick form to use, and it is linked at the end of this presentation for anyone who wants to see it. I've linked it there. But they've given us an opportunity to say, do you need to adjust your accountability system for just 1 year? Not an amendment. An amendment, you continue until you amend again. But do you need to make an adjustment for just 1 year? So we have been, as you would know us and expect us to do, we have been working on this since the first day of the announcement of the pandemic in March. Our TAC was called in to meet with us. I think they said we were the first state that had contacted them and said, we need help. We need advice and we need to plan, and they're used to us. We plan forward That's just the way we do business. So in thinking through this, what we have done is we have thought through every individual metric in our accountability system. And we've considered if we're going to have data that would meet our guidelines, and can we put that together for a full index. So we started with some very initial questions. Schools are open. Will schools open for the 2021 school session? And yes, they are. And while we do have schools that have to maybe close a classroom or have groups that are quarantined, our schools have been amazing at how they've pivoted instruction. They've kept the learning going. They've put in virtual learning that maybe they've never done before. Dr. Jeff Coates' team had a district conversion virtual school that increased its enrollment so that they could offer more services. I mean, everything that can be possibly done, I think our districts have tried to figure that out. They've submitted their district support plans. We're at 60 plus that have resubmitted revisions because they're really learning from the feedback, the data that they're getting regarding how their plans are working, and they're revising them. And that's exactly what we would hope they would do. So we are confident that our schools are doing everything they can humanly think about to serve these kids. And telling these stories and learning from each other is just going to make that even better. We know that we plan to assess in the spring of 2021. Ms. Horn has given you the timeline, the dates for assessment, and recommended that schools begin testing early, that we're thinking through what the communication to parents should be so that parents feel safe bringing their children to school. We know that we need to calculate our full Essa school index, and that is what the U.S. Department of Ed is recommending to us. But we need to do it for very selfish reasons. We need to know. We need real data to know what is working. School districts are talking about, hey, you know, we might want to continue having a virtual program at our school district in the future. But as Dr. Jeffcoat would tell you, that's very expensive. So you've got to put a lot of thought into it. You know, are students going to learn using that mode of instruction? And so lots of thought and preparation and planning and resource allocation has to go into those types of long-term decisions. And we need data to make those decisions. We need to know if there are subgroups that have been suffering. And so I think you asked a really good question a while ago about our English learners. You know, are they more remote or are they more on site? And, you know, is the remote instruction working for them if they're struggling with the language? And I think the same thing can be said for any of our subgroups. Is our high poverty students getting what they need on site or remote? And what can we learn from this? Was there a learning loss? And if so, how much? And in which groups of kids? And so if we look back at our data and look at those statistical reports, we know that between 2018, 2019, as a state, we did grow, we did improve. We showed performance. Not huge, but we were on that trajectory upward. But we do know that in some of our subgroups, they did not show that type of progress. And so what has been the impact? We need to know. So to fulfill this contract, this plan that we have that was approved by the U.S. Department of Ed, we need to know this information. And of course, if we do calculate our index, then we would be able to calculate rewards. And that's something we were not able to do this year because on the reward system, that's done by ranking. So that is now, that would be a possibility. So one of the things that I just want to kind of put out in the air is our approved ESSA plan is a contract with the U.S. Department of Ed. And as a part of this contract, we receive federal funds. In fact, I just given you the list here for what our state received in 2020-21 school year, was $371 million that come to the students of Arkansas to improve education as a result of this contract. So doing what we said we would do in our approved plan is very important, and not following it, I cannot reimburse the feds that amount of money out of my pocket. So I need all of you to help me follow this plan. But this doesn't even include what we get in child nutrition, special ed, a lot of other things. This is what my office has a direct impact and contact with. So there may be more outside of that I'm unaware of. But I just wanted to kind of put that into context for people. So when I hear other states say, well, we're just not going to test. I'm like, okay, you have an approved plan, and you've got millions riding on that for school districts. So that would be a huge hit. In our accountability system, in our approved plan, in fact, on page 14 of our approved plan, what we said in our commitment was that we would identify underperforming schools and those subgroups, because that's what we should be doing, helping the people who need help the most, that we would provide support. And that support is helping school districts to really understand their data. And while I think that's an ongoing challenge that we are always working on to help people have a better, deeper understanding, I have sat in several meetings recently where I've heard schools talk about the progress they're making, and the exact language they're using from the data is so exciting to me, because that means they understand the data, they're using it appropriately. They're not using one piece of data alone. They're using multiple sources of data to make really wise decisions for kids. So that's a win. Boy, that's a win. What we want to do is keep working on that communication so that our parents, our business leaders, our community members have that same level of understanding of our data. And finally, working on our school improvement plans. When we have a good, solid understanding of our data, then we're able to plan, do, and check. And when that's happening, we know if we plan the work and then work the plan, good things happen. So I talked about the criteria for accountability, and our accountability system is only as good as we trust it to be. And what builds our trust in it is that it's valid, that it's reliable and comparable. And so when I think about these things, I'm really just kind of thinking through what makes it valid. And what makes it valid is that we're able to do it the same way. And so, as you know, we put out business rules for calculating the SSS. Each year, we listen to our stakeholders about what needs to be better explained. That's always on the informational documents webpage, and we follow it to the T. That this data is reliable. And what makes it reliable, as Dr. Rolla spoke about a minute ago, and she will speak about it some more, is that we're testing a good sampling of our state. And so the agreed upon expectation is 95% tested. And so that's going to be critical in our work moving forward and in the communication. And then, is it comparable? What does it tell us if we look back at multiple years? What does it tell us when we think about our subgroups? If we're comparing one region of the state to another, what do we learn about ourselves? So it has to be suitable for comparison. So that brings us to a timeline. If we want to apply for an addendum, we have until February 1st to submit it. And that means that we would need to discuss it today, look it over, and get it out for public comment so that people have time to examine it, maybe come back and listen to this recording and think about that and give us public comment so that we in turn can bring it back to you before submitting by February 1st. We have worked through this, as I was telling you, and we're going to take it step by step in the thought process so that we can help you make a wise decision. So the first item is the establishment of long-term goals. Would we need to have an amendment, an addendum of long-term goals, or should we just go ahead and follow, report our long-term goals as we have been doing? And so, just in case people don't know, if you look on our state report card or a school report card and scroll down close to the bottom, we always have the long-term goals posted each year in the report card. We report long-term goals for English language arts, math, graduation, and English learners. I've just given you kind of a little visual there to show that this was all students' language arts. And you'll see that we were progressing between 18 and 19, and you'll see the data below it for the state. We will not have a bar to put on the bar chart for 2020, but we would recommend that we continue, that we not skip long-range goals data, that we not change that in any way. We would recommend that we just let our data tell us really where we are. The next question on the addendum is, would we need to make any change to our indicators? And while we know we would definitely need to communicate, we are feeling confident. I've turned these green because we're feeling confident, as I told you, that we had gone through each indicator and each component and said, will we have this data and can we use it? So when we look at taking the test, and we look at the academic achievement, we are feeling confident that we will be able to use the 2021 data. And so Denise, if you'll jump in and join me, Denise has been modeling some data on 95% tested. Denise, do you want to share a screen, or you want to talk through that a little bit? So while she's looking for that, we've been testing as a state, I believe at 99%. And so I want to kind of put that into context, and I've asked Denise to run some simulation. Denise, you're on mute. Denise, you're on mute.
Okay, I'll start over. No, we because of the fact that we did have the missing data last year, we've done more analyses this year, trying to anticipate and trying to understand what could be possible under 2021 assessment. And one of the things that we looked at was in 2018, compared to 2019, we went from about 99% tested to little over 99% tested in all subjects. And it was a big, I mean, it doesn't seem like much, but it was a pretty, to get at 99 across all subjects is pretty big. So here you see the numbers, and you can see 2018 for English language arts, math and science. And then over here you see 2019, and you can see the number of students, which I think is the really critical part. We went from about 2,900 to 3,100 that weren't being tested, and now we're under 3,000 across the board. And so Ms. Kaufman had asked, is there a way, we were talking about this and the fear that we won't have all these kids testing, and she asked, is there a way to kind of look at how that might impact? And so we've run some simulations, and prior to running the simulations, we really had to figure out what are the number of kids that would have to be not tested in order for us to, as a state, move down to 97% tested or 95% tested or 93% tested. And this, I think, is the most telling piece. When you just look at those percentages using the table above in 2019, and you say, what number of kids would be 97% of the students tested? So you can see we'd have to not test almost 9,000 kids in order to get down to just 97% tested across the state. And then the other 95% tested, we would be missing almost 15,000 kids in our testing system. So across the state, that really gives you a sense of what it would take statewide to really be hit on percent tested. But of course, it's the kids who don't get tested are not necessarily the same, and it's not necessarily the same across all the grade spans. And so this is kind of a confusing chart. I'll put myself back up here, but what do those 9,000 kids look like, right? Well, the simulation we did took the not tested kids from 2019, and we also looked at it for 2018, just to make sure we were getting reliable, similar results, and we did. And so we used the 2019, and we looked at the student level, and we said, what are the characteristics of kids that are not tested? And there's an analysis you can do that. And then that produces a probability for kids of not being tested based on those characteristics and the extent to which they meet that combination of characteristics. And so with that, we were able to run simulations of what would the Essa 2019 score look like, and the weighted achievement score look like if we didn't test 99%. What if we tested 97%? What if we tested 95%? And so we didn't even get to the 93 just because of what we found in the 97 and the 95. So I'll share with you that, it seems that we do test, we have more kids not tested at the middle and high school levels, mostly kids who are mobile. And there are a couple of other characteristics. And so when we run that and then we remove those kids, or we count those kids as not tested. So if we say we want to simulate 97% tested, we're going to count the kids, the top 9,000 kids approximately, that the top probability of not being tested. What that results in is the difference you see here. So in the published calculation, the number of schools in 2019 that didn't meet 95% tested, there was, for the all students group, there was 1 school for elementary and 13 at the high school. So we've done such a great job as a state in reducing the number of kids not tested that it has very little impact on the overall Essa index. When you move to 97%, you see that we pick up some more middle schools and we pick up some more high schools that might be under 95% tested. And the way that our index works is there's a calculation that adjusts your score based on if you test below 95% tested. And so we can actually recalculate the scores to see the extent to which those 22 middle schools are impacted, or those 230 high schools. And then you can see the number of elementary, middle, and high schools if we didn't test 95%. So the probability of not testing 95% this year is lower, I think, than most people think it is based on the big state picture. What people need to understand is if you've had problems getting kids, particularly middle school and high school kids, tested, particularly your mobile kids, then you want to really be proactive now. The good news is, in terms of reliability and validity, the way that our Essa index has been constructed, and I think it's a testament to all the modeling that we did before putting all the components together, but it's pretty stable, even at 97 and 95% statewide. And again, you'll see that there's more of an impact. So at 95% tested and 97% tested, the weighted achievement score is the score that's impacted the most by this. And so you can see for elementary, it's like a hundredth of a point in weighted achievement and 100th of a point in the Essa school index. I'm looking here at the original 99% in this table for the elementary, and then 97 and 95. So at 97%, we really didn't see elementaries predicted to be impacted. And then at the middle level, you can see it's under a point that they're impacted between the original and when we simulate removing kids based on the probability that they wouldn't be tested, based on the characteristics of kids who don't get tested. And then you can see at the high school, it's a little over a point. It's like 1.13. And that is that's the weighted achievement score. But the impact, once you put weighted achievement together with all the other indicators, it's a very small impact at 97 and 95%. Now, my caution is that that doesn't mean that individual schools won't be more drastically impacted. You can see, if you look at the minimum scores, in some cases they did change, and we do see across the continuum an impact when we have some. Oh, let me see if I can stop. I want to stop this share for a minute and look at Miss Kaufman and see how I'm doing. If we're still good, and maybe share this one instead for just a moment, so that you can see what we did was we looked at, okay, we never just leave it at the state means. We want to know how it impacts at the school level. And so running this for the all students group, I don't know if y'all can see this. Sometimes it's really small, but this looks at the middle level. And when it's dark green, it means it's the same score they had before. They're falling in the same area they fell before. If it's light blue, it means that that's their original score in the distribution. And if they came down, so you can see you'll have a light blue and a light green. Likely these schools here fell down a little bit in their overall weighted achievement. But then when you look over on the right-hand side where it's the Essa school index score, because it only impacts weighted achievement, it has a tendency to stabilize out with the overall Essa index score. So I know I've said a lot. I'm going to stop screen sharing for a minute and see what questions you have. I think overall, I was really thrilled that, number one, that we could simulate this. We do know that lower achievement is possible because of the COVID change, but we've now been able to quantify what the percent tested impact would be.
So let me just add that no 2019 data was changed.
Exactly.
So that's always a question I get after one of these meetings when we talk about simulated data. We did not change any 2019 data. Everybody's ESSA score is still exactly the same. That Dr. Arola is just testing what we know on some data that's very stable to see what the results would be. And so that just helps us to make really wise decisions. So we know from our feedback that everybody is concerned about testing 95% because of the impact that they believe it will have on achievement. But I think Dr. Rola's modeling here shows us the things that we need to know to be proactive so that we don't see a negative impact. So I'm interested to hear from our panel members, our committee members, anything else that we need to think about other than we know we've got to get out and work with high schools to make sure they're communicating, middle schools, and make sure that they've got a plan for how we're building those relationships with our students who have been highly mobile, because we are required to test all students the best we can.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I was very impressed with, I knew Dr. Arola was top of the top, but to take that and to show us how the 95% would stabilize out, I'm very impressed. So thank you. And I know that was a short presentation on that, but I'm sure it was many, many hours of work. So thank you for doing that and digging into the data to help us make an informed decision.
It was actually a lot of fun. So it was hours, but I enjoyed this kind of work.
As one math geek to another, I understand that it was fun. Okay. All right, Ms. Flowers, do you have questions or comments?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Bratton?
No questions.
Okay. Dr. Jeffcoat?
So just a quick question. So, and I appreciate all the work as well. I don't know that I fully understand all aspects of it, but I think I get the gist of it. So we're grouping them in elementary and middle school and high school. Is that our reporting requirement? So that is our reporting requirement. So I feel confident that I also feel confident that we can statewide reach the 95%, but individual schools may have a challenge, especially if you're in a large school system who has a large population of students who have elected to be virtual. That could be a greater challenge. So knowing that the 95% is a requirement across the state in those categories, I feel a lot better about our ability to meet that requirement.
Yeah, and the other thing that I thought was really interesting was looking at the kids, looking at cycle 2 and instructional options. There's just a slight, your virtual kids are like 1 percentage point more of them are mobile. Our overall state population of mobility is generally around 6%. You know, from year to year, it seems to be pretty stable. And when we looked at instructional options and we looked at student mobility based on the 2019, because we haven't calculated it yet for this year, but just looking at those kids who are now in 5th grade through 12th grade, it's only 1% more in the virtual options that are mobile. But what you're now forearmed to really understand that that's the profile of the kid that ends up not being tested, that mobile kid. If you've got mobile kids, make sure you're making arrangements at the beginning of the testing window to try and capture them. I mean, I just feel like, for me, being able to get this information made me feel like we could share things that could help you to be proactive. Exactly as you said, larger high schools, larger middle schools, kids who are more mobile, making sure that they have those connections. Very important.
Ms. Sanders?
I don't have any questions, but because I tend to lean towards language arts and not math, I just want to say how very much I appreciated how you broke that down in your explanations. I'm going to join Dr. Jeffcoat and say I may not understand all of it, but I think I can get the gist of it now. Thank you so much for that.
Ms. Haywood?
Many thanks for that great explanation, and I'm with the others. We may not understand everything, but we'll get there. Thank you so much.
Okay. Ina?
Echo everything everyone said. And I loved how you break it into the subpopulation groups as well too. I think that's going to be helpful to see in the long run the trajectory of how we meet those target groups. So thank you.
Anthony?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else have a comment or a question? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rowland.
I would just add that as you think about that, our school districts submitted district support plans this year for Ready for Learning and the waivers the state board gave them. But every one of them put a statement in there from the very beginning, communicating to their parents and the community that students would come on site for statewide summative assessments. So they've been very clear from the beginning what the expectation is. So get us back to our visual. And so our next indicator that we examined is growth. And growth is going to be really an important indicator for us to consider this year. And so once again, I'm going to go to our expert to talk about growth. Dr. Rollo?
I don't have any slides for this, but Ms. Kaufman had asked us right when the COVID shutdown happened to start thinking about scenarios. And one of the scenarios that she was anticipating was, what if we get a waiver of testing? What does that do to our growth model? Because that is such a valued component of the Essa School Index. And it's one of those components that really puts all schools and classrooms on a level playing field when we think about how it treats individual students and their score histories. And we modeled early on what it would mean to have a missing score in that score history, and presented all of that information to the technical advisory committee. They were, I think, pleased that at the results that we got, that it was really stable, even though what we did was we took out the 2018 score, kept the rest of the score history, and recalculated a gross score for 2019, and then looked at what does that look like at the student level, what does that look like at the school level. And again, because our model is so robust and so stable, it really handled that well. And so we were like first out of the chute with information like that. And then we found out that ACT is going to go ahead and provide lookup tables for SGP scores in 2021 that are determined with 2-year prior score. And we asked them to also do the homework that we did of running all the analyses on how stable is it, how, the word I want to use is noisy. So if you're missing a year, the prior year, how much noise is there in the growth score that you're getting for a particular student? And is that pretty stable across a low performing student with high growth, a high performing student with low growth? Does it impact everybody in a mutually impactful way? And they're doing that, but our growth model is going to be even more stable because it will include those additional 3 years of data in the score history. So I'm actually pretty excited about the fact that we have the model, that we will be able to calculate it, that we'll basically be looking at a score history that will have 2017, 2018, 2019. It'll be missing 2020, but we will also have 2021. And I'm anticipating that there might be a little more noise because of factors that we can't control that were related to COVID and opportunity to learn. But in terms of the model itself, the model is not the problem. What this will really do is give you a good sense of how well kids are growing and what they've done from before COVID to after COVID. So I think it's going to be a really important piece of information for schools to use.
So Dr. Arola, when we were putting these slides together, just so everybody on the committee understands, we first of all thought about what does growth tell us? So you'll see the claim there. And then through that analysis, we looked at what are we gonna learn at the student level, and what are all the different ways we could test this to see how stable it is. And then at the school level, once again, how do we make sure that we feel good about calculating growth? We looked at all the different ways that we could calculate it. And then, but we came back to our recommendation is to calculate 2021 growth with a missing year of 2020. We're not making up any scores. And the reason we feel confident about this and recommend this is because we've tested it as you've described, and we feel good about it. We know that it follows our business rules. We can help educators understand it. And I think it's going to be really important information for us to know if we're going to need to fill in gaps for kids that may have had lost learning, that we've really got to think about and have data to help us know just how big it was, or is there a loss in learning, or have our amazing Arkansas teachers already filled all those gaps up? We need to know. So let's stop there. And any questions about growth?
You know, personally, you know, you could fill it in with a data point, or we can just find out the truth about where is that student, where are we growing, where are there gaps in subgroups, you know, are the gaps getting bigger? And I think that, you know, as a former educator in a classroom, I want to know the truth about where my kids are. And because if I know the truth about where they are, then I can do something. And you know, that's kind of what how I look at it. But what other comments do you have about growth that we want to discuss? Anyone? Okay. Mr. Bennett?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Ms. Hayward? Ms. Sanders?
No, ma'am.
Dr. Jeffcoat, I know y'all have discussed this.
Well, no, I just wonder, how does this have any impact one way or another for the students that will be identified for comprehensive or targeted support in the future? And does this play out in any way? Probably not, right?
So at the student level, it won't have an impact. At the school level, it because it will be part of your overall Essa school index score, it'll be part of that 3 years of consistently underperforming data. So because if you remember the way that we do targeted support and improvement, it's an annual notification. It's not an identification. And so you would just know, hey, our Essa school, if you have a subgroup that falls below the first percentile of the Title I schools overall school Essa index score, you would be notified of that.
Yeah.
And that would include, it wouldn't just be this year, you would also have to have been under that first percentile rank in 2018 and 2019 in order to receive that notification.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So everybody will be kind of equally impacted in a lot of ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Bratton?
Nope.
Ms. Flowers?
No, thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments on growth? All right, Ms. Coffin?
Turn my mic on and take us to our third indicator, which is graduation rate. And if you look back on that timeline, you notice that even though we kind of moved everything else forward, we are still responsible for calculating graduation rate. Graduation rate in our index is lagging graduation. So right now we're in the just doing the graduation rate corrections, and then the 2020 graduation data will come out on our report card, and then it will be used next year in our 2021 Essa School Index. And so we are on track with our graduation rate to have that reported. We are on track. We feel really good about it. And once we've gone through corrections, we'll know what our actual graduation rates are. But we feel good about it. It's looking good. So I won't spoil the celebration, but we're confident. Our next indicator is, of course, our school quality and student success indicator, which makes up all of those components that we have talked about. We have been able to report some of those components in our report card, and by doing our assessment in the spring, we will then be able to include all of the components for the 2021 school year. Denise, did you run any on SQSS you want to address?
No, as you mentioned, we did go ahead and calculate the components that met the characteristics for stability and comparability this 2020. So that will be out on the report card. We did not include chronic or student engagement because of the shutdown in March. And so there won't be an overall SQSS score, but there will be the individual components for schools to use from 2020. And I think that's important that you still have that information. The reason we aren't going to put the total SQSS score in the reporting is because we don't want to put a score in there that won't be comparable from the total score from prior years. But you can compare the scores for on-time credits. I think we've got on-time credits, high school GPA, participation in AP, IB, and concurrent credit courses. We have computer science. We have community service learning. And then we have the 2 ACT components as well. And we were able to do those because we got the testing. ACT, the way that we use the best over 3 years, we had enough testing to be able to do that confidently.
Thanks, Dr. Rolo. So in the addendum, the next section that we have to look at is, can we meaningfully differentiate? And so what that means is, can we put our schools into order? Can we look at them and compare them? Can we identify who needs support based on not only all students, but the subgroups? And I think Dr. Rolo's presentation has shown you that we have looked at our accountability index from every angle. We've had our technical advisory committee, and just for anybody who's interested, our technical advisory committee is made up of psychometricians from across the United States. These are people that are experts in their field. They're the kind of people Dr. Arola runs with. Most of the time I don't understand what they're talking about, but she translates for me. So we try to keep up, but I trust in them. And I would hope that every educator in our state trusts in them, because they really push us to look at this from so many different angles. What if this, what if that? Everything, as Dr. Arola has shown you with her modeling and simulations of the data. So we feel very comfortable here. On the identification of schools, we again feel comfortable because this is 21 is not an identification year for us. So we feel very comfortable that we can exit schools, but we would not be identifying, and we would have a little more time to see what the impact is. So in that section, they ask us about timelines. We would not be changing our timeline other than the waiver that already shifted 2020. We would not recommend any methodology changes. We do know that some states are totally amending their index because they've had things in, or index, or what other system they may have used they've had things in their programs that didn't work or were changed by their state legislators or something. So they're trying to fix things. I think Starlinda asked that question early on, is when do you ever consider amendments? And those are things, you know, if you change testing companies, if you change cut scores, if you changed something else at the state level, then you may have to come back and amend your plan. And so that is certainly occurring for some states. Some states are struggling to think about how they're going to test kids because they're still totally virtual and their states are not allowing on-site. And so they don't know how they're going to be able to do that. So we are so fortunate that I think our host state has been thinking through all of this work. So we do feel that we can continue to provide support for our identified schools and continue to exit the schools that meet the criteria. The one thing that we will have to submit in the addendum is under the exit criteria, we will have to check the box that we are not counting 2019, 2020 in our timeline. And so some states are trying to shift more or do whatever. We feel confident that this is the best plan for us right now at this time. Of course, there are unknowns that can happen, but we are trying to go on data-driven decision making. So what I wanted to show you is here at the very end is the draft addendum, so you can actually see it. And we fill out for Arkansas. This is posted on the U.S. Department of Ed's webpage. It explains everything. And then Secretary Key would have to sign it and date it. It would need to go out for public comment, but each section that I've gone over is exactly in order of how the addendum would ask us to respond if we needed to make a temporary one-year change. And so right now, scrolling on down, the change or the submission that we would have is in the last section, section E, in that we would have to mark the box that the state does not count the 2019-20 school year toward the number of years in which a school meets exit criteria. So with support of this committee, what we would recommend is that we put this addendum out for public comment. We did not get a specific number of days, but it's kind of standard practice to do 30 days public comment period. We would like to put that out and ask the general public, you know, what concerns or questions they have, and then report that back to you in order to have time to submit and meet the February 1st deadline.
You know, I think that the number of things that we could have asked permission for, and then that we are only asking for the 1 year not to count on school improvement, shows the strength of our ESSA plan. I really do think it shows the strength of the plan, the data collection, all the different things that you've thought ahead and the team has thought through. I just really think that all of this, just by only needing that one minor thing during a year that has been turned everyone's lives upside down, I just really think that shows the strength of what we're doing as a state here in Arkansas. And I want to extend my thanks to you and your team and Dr. Arola and her team of all the others that have spoke today, how much we appreciate all that you have done. And I'll open it up to any other committee members that have either a comment or a question for Ms. Kaufman. Well, I'm hearing silence. So is the silence consent that you agree that we only need the 1 year pause there? Dr. Jeffcoat, I see you're
yeah, it is for It is for me. I support, Ms. Kaufman, do we need this in like a form of a motion to support, or do we just all need to somehow agree that we would like to move forward with putting this out for public comment?
I don't think we're required to have a motion, but I
Okay.
think always it would look nice in our minutes.
Okay.
Well, I'll make that motion that we move forward with asking Secretary Key to proceed with putting the addendum out for public comment.
All right. I have a
I'll
motion.
second it.
A
And,
second.
okay. I think I heard Emma first. And so all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, Ms. Kaufman, I believe you've got a good consensus from us all.
So our next steps then, I appreciate all of that. We are meeting with our technical advisory committee again, presenting everything to them. What they bring to the conversations is not only that statistical analysis of all of the working components, but they also bring to us their experience of working in other states and for other states. So they will bring ideas. And just a quick information, we participate in CCSSO, Chief State School Officers Organization, a Title I group. We participate in several of those kind of federal or national level meet organizations. And so we listen intently to say what's happening, what's the temperature across the whole nation. And when this addendum first came out, we heard a lot of people, a lot of states going, oh, they're going to complete every component. They were going to change every part for the 1 year. But as they've been able to kind of calm down and think through, we were encouraged to hear other states saying exactly what we've said today. We need to know. We need real data. We need to be data driven in our decision making. It's unfortunate we have to submit by February 1st because what we'd really love to do is take the test, calculate our index, and report to you the statistical impact of it. But this is where we are. This is our requirement. But other states are following suit and they're doing the same thing. So I find comfort in that rational heads have really prevailed and people are thinking through and the schools are speaking up and saying we need real data. We need real data to help us make really wise decisions. So I just applaud once again our schools in their effort to do the right thing for kids. Really powerful. So our last item is to think about when we may need to meet again. And I bring to you two options. The auditorium is available January 13th and January 27th. And so that'll give us time to have our 30-day comment period, get that data all put together for you to present to you and to see if there's any change in the temperature in January, but right before it would be time for us to submit. So January 27th feels very
close to February 1st.
You know how nervous I get with
yeah,
deadlines.
I was thinking the same thing.
And so January 13th is the day before the state board. I would feel really good about that and then take the same information to the state board the next day.
Yeah, that 13th, is that agreeable to the rest of the committee? I'm seeing
that's
lots
perfect.
of noddings. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So 9:30 on January 13th. Okay.
And if I may, I'd like to give a shout out to Team Digital.
Sure.
Who always sets up our virtual meetings for us. So,
Okay.
Evan, Patrick, and Stephen Walker, and of course our good friend Dan over here,
Yes.
who always takes care of us on site.
Yeah, all right. Well, what would we do without all the technology people? We couldn't make it right now, could we? All right. Any other questions or comments before we adjourn? All right. I don't hear anyone. I need a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
All right, Ms. Sanders, a
Second.
second. Okay, second for Ms. Flowers, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you guys so much for attending and all of your great comments and suggestions. We very much appreciate all that you do for us. Y'all have
Thank you.
safe
Thank y'all.
Thanksgiving. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Bye.